single mother helped a homeless man, not knowing he was a millionaire. The late afternoon sun was sinking low, painting the small Midwestern town in deep shades of orange. Along its quiet streets walked a woman with arms weighed down by grocery bags. This was Emily Carter, 29 years old, a single mother whose shoulders had long carried the heavy burden of survival. Emily worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on, mornings and afternoons at a roadside diner where the bell above the door chimed with every customer, and nights cleaning offices for a small company. Her life was measured in pennies and minutes. Every bill was a worry, every paycheck already spoken for. Yet in her tired eyes, a light remained, the light of Maya, her 7-year-old daughter. Maya was the reason Emily didn't collapse, the force that made her smile even when her hands were cracked and raw from cleaning chemicals. To strangers, Emily might appear as nothing more than a thin woman with her hair pinned up hastily, her clothes simple, her shoes worn at the heels. But to Maya, her mother was a superhero. Every night the little girl wrapped her arms around her and whispered, "With you, I'm not afraid of anything." And Emily, though her heart carried weight, always smiled back. "Me too, as long as I have you." Their apartment sat on the 2nd floor of an old, weathered building. Paint peeled from the walls, the staircase groaned with every step, and in winter the drafts were merciless. Yet inside, Maya still sang, still drew, still painted her world with the bright colors of imagination. Mornings began with a faint smell of toast and a thin glass of milk. Emily packed a peanut butter sandwich for lunch, so often repeated that Maya jokingly called it Mom's Special. After dropping her daughter at school, Emily rushed to the diner. There, her smile became a mask, concealing the exhaustion that pressed against her chest. By late afternoon, she scoured the supermarket aisles for discounted items. The grocery bags she carried home were heavy, not just with food, but with responsibility. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily whispered silent prayers, that tomorrow her daughter would still laugh freely, no matter how harsh the world outside might be. At night, when Maya slept, Emily sat at the table, bills spread before her. Rent, utilities, school supplies. With a worn pencil, she scratched out calculations, searching for some small space to breathe. Sometimes her tears stained the paper, but she wiped them away quickly. She had sworn that Maya would never see her mother break. Emily Carter was the face of countless single mothers across America, women who had become everyday warriors, driven by love for their children. It was that love alone that kept her standing, even when the world seemed to turn its back. That afternoon, after a long shift at the diner and a quick stop at the supermarket, Emily clutched 2 heavy grocery bags and hurried down the small street. The northern wind swept through, carrying the chill that signaled winter was drawing near. As she passed the corner bakery, she froze. On the steps right outside sat a man. He wore an old, worn hoodie, his head bent low, hands shoved deep into his pockets. His beard was scruffy, his hair matted under the hood. Beside him lay only a torn backpack, looking as if it had traveled hundreds of miles. At first glance, Emily thought, just another homeless man. The small town had plenty of them. People usually passed by quickly, avoiding eye contact, as if afraid hardship might cling to them. Emily wanted to do the same, until his eyes lifted. Those eyes, gray-blue, deep and weary, held something different from the others she had seen on the streets. Not only hunger, not only fatigue, but a loneliness that cut straight to the bone, as if he had been forgotten by the world for far too long. Emily's heart stirred. She knew she had little to spare, struggling even more than many. Yet the instinct of a mother, of a heart weathered by loss, would not let her turn away. She set the bags down on the step, letting out a quiet sigh. "Are you hungry?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. The man looked startled, as if such words had not been meant for him in ages. He hesitated, then nodded. I suppose I am." His voice was deep but hoarse, tinged with shyness. Emily opened one of the bags and pulled out the sandwich she had planned to save for Maya's snack. She held it out toward him. "It's not much, but you can have this." Before he could take it, a child's voice piped up, "Mommy, why is that man sitting out here?" Maya, with her wide brown eyes, looked up at her mother. Her twin ponytails swayed as she tilted her head. Emily bent down and stroked her cheek. "He doesn't have a place to stay, sweetheart." But Maya showed no fear. On the contrary, she beamed brightly and stepped forward. "I'm Maya. You're not scary. You look kind." The man blinked, his throat tightening. How long had it been since he'd heard words so innocent, so free of doubt or judgment? In that moment, he gave a faint smile, strange to his own face, weak but genuine. "Hello, Maya." Emily was taken aback. She had trained herself to be cautious around strangers, especially with Maya beside her. Yet something about this man did not trigger her usual alarms. Perhaps it was his withdrawn posture, or the warmth in his voice, or simply the way he looked at Maya, with a reverence rare in men she didn't know. She stood, handed him the smaller bag. "You can't stay out here all night. Carry this for me. Think of it as repayment." He froze. People had given him money, food, but never companionship, never respect. Slowly, he accepted the bag, nodding gently. "Thank you." They began walking together. Maya, without hesitation, slipped her small hand into his. Emily's heart skipped uneasily, but when she saw the shy smile on his face, she remained silent. Emily had never been someone who trusted easily. Life had taught her that kindness, when given to the wrong person, could become a double-edged sword. And for a single mother, mistakes meant danger. Yet that night, as she let the man quietly follow her back to her small apartment, she realized she had just broken her greatest rule. Never allow a stranger into the little world meant only for herself and her daughter. Emily's apartment was on the second floor of an old building, the wooden stairs creaking under every step. Maya chattered away happily beside him, her tiny hand clasping his as though they had known each other for a very long time. At the door, Emily turned back, her eyes wary, her expression filled with hesitation. "You can sit outside on the step. I need to cook dinner." Her tone was stern, as if to remind him that this was only a temporary concession. He nodded without protest, set the grocery bag down beside him, and sat quietly on the porch. Under the yellow glow spilling from the apartment, his figure looked somewhat adrift, misplaced. Maya immediately ran to the window, peering out, then whispered to her mother, "Mommy, he doesn't look sad anymore." Those innocent words made Emily's heart falter. As she cooked, her thoughts would not settle. Am I making a mistake? Letting a stranger sit so close to my daughter, even if only outside, was already risky enough. Yet the image of those gray-blue eyes lingered, the startled look when he received the sandwich, the weak but genuine smile he gave Maya. All of it tugged at her like an invisible thread. When dinner was ready, Emily quietly served an extra plate, some rice, a few pieces of stew, and bread, neatly arranged, and carried it out to the porch. He looked up, surprised, when she appeared with the tray of food. "Eat something. It's cold out," Emily said softly. Her voice was still firm, but her eyes had softened. She did not stop there. Returning inside, she brought out an old blanket and a thin pillow. Setting them down beside where he sat, she let out a quiet sigh. "You can sleep here tonight, but only out here." He looked at the blanket, then at her, his eyes shining with barely concealed emotion. He nodded, his voice catching in his throat. "Thank you. I really don't know what else to say." She sighed. "I'm Emily." He hesitated, then replied, "I'm Daniel." From inside the apartment, Maya clapped her hands gently, her eyes sparkling. "Mommy is the kindest." Emily pressed her lips together and turned away, but her heart stirred involuntarily, as though in that fragile moment she had allowed a stranger to take one more step into the small world that belonged only to the two of them. In the days that followed, Daniel began to appear regularly outside the small apartment. At first, Emily wanted to turn him away, but then he quietly started helping, carrying groceries up the stairs, sweeping the front step, even fixing the creaky door hinge she had long since grown used to living with. Maya quickly grew even closer to him, calling him Uncle Danny with her natural innocence. Emily felt a flicker of discomfort at that closeness, but little by little, she realized his presence did not bring danger. It brought a rare warmth into her life, one otherwise filled with tension. What surprised Emily most was the way Daniel behaved. He never acted demanding or intrusive. He always kept just enough distance, yet showed enough sincerity to inspire trust. With Maya, he spoke with remarkable patience, answering every childish question as though it were the most important thing in the world. At first, Emily kept her guard up. She allowed him to carry bags, fix small things, but reminded herself over and over he was still a stranger. Yet as the evening stretched on, she found herself growing used to his presence. A silent man who always seemed willing to do the little things she no longer had the energy for. One night, returning from a late shift at the diner, Emily stopped short. Maya was sitting at the kitchen table, her notebook open, brows furrowed in concentration. Across from her sat Daniel, patiently explaining sums and subtractions, his voice calm and steady. Every so often, he slipped in a joke that sent Maya into peals of laughter. The sight struck Emily's heart with an unexpected ache. For years she had carried everything alone, the meals, the lessons, the hidden tears. Never once had anyone shared the weight. And yet here was a man, once a stranger, now seated in her tiny kitchen, guiding her daughter through numbers as if he had been waiting his whole life for this. In the days that followed, Daniel continued to surprise her. He swept the stoop, repaired the loose doorknob, hauled laundry up the steep stairs. He never complained, never acted as though he was doing her a favor. Instead, everything he did carried an ease, as though he had long been accustomed to this role. In the evenings, when Maya had gone to bed, Emily sometimes joined him on the stoop. They didn't talk much, but when they did, he told little stories, of odd jobs he'd picked up, of people he had met along the way. His words were vivid, more vivid than one would expect of a man who claimed to drift aimlessly. He spoke once of a cafe in a big city, where he had sat for hours just watching people pass. Another time of a long-distance bus ride, where he shared a meal with an old stranger. In every story, Emily heard the wisdom and experience of someone who had traveled far, seen more than most around her ever would. Slowly, her wariness softened. In its place came something unfamiliar, a sense of safety. With Daniel there, the small apartment seemed less heavy, less lonely. She no longer felt entirely alone. Maya, of course, adored him. She clung to Uncle Danny with endless trust. When Emily warned her to keep some distance, Maya only laughed. "But he's nice, Mommy." And each time Emily saw that radiant smile on her daughter's face, her resolve weakened. In Daniel's eyes, Emily saw a gentleness she had never known from another man. Patience, respect, no demands. And yet sometimes, in fleeting moments, there was something deeper, something unsaid, a secret waiting beneath the surface. What Emily didn't know was that Daniel wrestled with it nightly. He longed to tell her the truth, that he had once been a CEO, that behind him lay a world of power and fortune. But fear silenced him. If she knew, would she ever see him the same way? And so, night after night, Daniel chose silence, clinging to the one thing that felt real: being with Emily and Maya. In their small home, he was not billionaire Daniel Hayes. He was simply Uncle Danny, an ordinary man belonging in an ordinary family. As time passed, Daniel's presence in Emily and Maya's life became almost natural, but with familiarity came watchful eyes from those around them. One afternoon, as Emily walked Maya home from school, the downstairs neighbor leaned out her window and called, "Emily, be careful with that man. Drifters, men with no home, they never bring anything good." Emily stopped, her grip tightening around her daughter's hand. "He hasn't done anything wrong. He's been helping me." The neighbor sniffed. "That's how it starts. They act kind, then show their true colors. Don't let that little girl get too close." The words clung to Emily the whole way home, like a thorn pressed against her chest. She knew the woman was fond of gossip, but still, could she be right? That evening, as Maya sat perched on Daniel's knee, she asked brightly, "Uncle Danny, why don't you have a house?" Emily froze at the sink, her hands stilling as she turned. Daniel paused, then gave a faint smile. "Sometimes home isn't a place. It's the people who make you feel safe." Maya nodded, satisfied with the simple answer. But Emily wasn't. To her, it wasn't an explanation. It was an evasion. And for the first time, suspicion crept into her heart like a thin crack in glass. She began noticing more. Late at night, when she thought he was asleep, she heard low murmurs outside. Daniel stood in the shadows, phone pressed to his ear, his voice hushed but tense. "Handle it. I'm not ready to return." Emily held her breath, her pulse quickening. Return? Return where? Who was he, really? She told herself she should ask him directly, but each time she saw the warmth in his eyes when he looked at Maya, the words dissolved. Was she imagining things? Or was this man hiding something far greater than she could guess? The doubt grew, clinging tighter each day. And Emily did not yet know. The truth was already on its way, waiting for the moment to break free. The suspicion in Emily's heart had barely taken root when the truth arrived, sudden and merciless, leaving her no time to prepare. One evening, as she wiped down tables at the diner, her weary boss flipped through a glossy magazine left behind by a customer. He frowned, tapped a page, and said, "Isn't that the guy I've seen hanging around with you?" Emily leaned over, her chest constricted. There on the page was a clean-shaven man in a tailored suit, standing among powerful figures. The caption read, "Daniel Hayes, founder of one of America's leading tech companies." Her body froze. The man in the magazine was the same one sitting on her stoop night after night. There was no denying it. She walked home in a storm of emotions, confusion, fury, hurt. Questions tumbled through her mind. Why had he hidden the truth? Why let her believe he was nothing but a drifter? Had it all been some cruel experiment? When she opened the door, Daniel was waiting. He rose, offering his familiar gentle smile. But this time, Emily could not return it. She dropped her grocery bag, her hands trembling. "You're not who you said you were." Her voice cracked, trembling with both fear and anger. Daniel stilled, the smile fading. He said nothing, only met her gaze with heavy silence. Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she shook her head. "Who are you really, Daniel? Or should I call you the billionaire CEO?" The air in the small apartment thickened, suffocating. Maya slept peacefully in the next room, unaware, while in the cramped living room 2 worlds collided, a man stripped of his disguise and a woman whose fragile trust had just shattered. Emily turned away, her voice unsteady but resolute. "You let me believe you had nothing while I scraped by to feed my daughter. You walked into my life as a man with empty hands, but in truth, you sat on an empire. Do you know what that means to me? Betrayal." Daniel stepped forward, ready to explain, but Emily lifted her hand to stop him. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, broken but firm. "I can't let you near Maya again. I won't risk her heart, or mine." The door closed behind her words, leaving Daniel rooted in place, surrounded by silence heavier than any loss he had ever known. After that night, Daniel disappeared from Emily's doorstep. The little apartment returned to its familiar quiet, but this quiet was no longer safe. It was heavy, hollow, and sad. Each evening, Emily found herself listening for the creak of the stairs, half expecting to see him again. And each night, when he didn't appear, the silence felt sharper, like a reminder of something she had lost without realizing how much it mattered. Emily tried to carry on with life. She still worked her morning shifts at the diner, still cleaned offices at night, still packed sandwiches for Maya's lunch. But in every moment, Daniel's absence was a gap that nothing seemed able to fill. Maya felt it most. More than once she tugged at her mother's sleeve, her eyes glistening with tears. "Mommy, why isn't Uncle Danny coming anymore? He promised to read me another story." Emily forced a smile, keeping her voice steady. "Sometimes people make promises they can't keep, sweetheart." But inside, she knew. Daniel had never once broken a promise to Maya. Elsewhere, Daniel had returned to his old world. Polished boardrooms, ringing phones, the sycophantic smiles of colleagues. But it all felt meaningless. Reports filled with numbers, glittering parties, hollow praise. None of it could fill the emptiness he had left behind in that small apartment with Emily and Maya. In silence, Daniel sought redemption. He no longer appeared at their door, but he quietly worked behind the scenes to mend the broken pieces of Emily's life. The overdue utility bills were suddenly granted extensions. The landlord sent a letter offering more time for rent. Old debts quietly vanished from her records. Emily was bewildered, unsure of how or why, but deep down she had a guess. Daniel never sought gratitude. He signed nothing, left no trace. He only wanted to shoulder some of her burdens, no matter how much she resented him. One evening, as mother and daughter washed dishes together, Maya looked up, her eyes wide and shining. "Mommy, I don't think Uncle Danny cared about money. I think he cared about us." Emily froze, her hands still in the water. The child's words, simple yet piercing, struck harder than any argument. She remembered every moment. Daniel fixing the broken hinge, patiently teaching Maya math, waiting on the stoop in the rain. Not once had he spoken of money. Not once had he tried to wield his wealth. Maya's words rang like a bell. And Emily began to wonder, were all the smiles, the kindness, the listening ear, really lies? Or were they the truest part of Daniel Hayes? The next day, when she woke up, Emily knew she could no longer continue living in the spiral of doubt and pain. She had avoided Daniel, had tried to push him out of her life, but her heart still carried too many unanswered questions. And there was only one way, to face him directly. That morning, Emily left Maya with her teacher and caught a bus to the city center. Towering glass skyscrapers rose high into the sky, cold and luxurious, so alien compared to her cramped little world. As she stepped into the lobby of the building with the glowing letters Hayes Technologies, her steps faltered for a moment. The receptionist eyed her with suspicion. "Do you have an appointment?" Emily took a deep breath, her voice trembling but firm. "No, but tell Mr. Daniel Hayes that Emily Carter is here. He will understand." Just a few minutes later, 2 men in black suits appeared, escorting her into the elevator. It shot upward, slicing through layer after layer of glass and steel until the doors finally opened at the very top floor. A vast office stretched before her, surrounded by glass walls, the entire city sprawled at her feet. Daniel stood with his back to her, his silhouette cast long against the pale gray light of the sky. When he turned around, his eyes met hers, startled at first, then softening into a silence heavy with emotion. "Emily." Her heart pounded wildly, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I didn't come for money. I didn't come to step into your glittering world. I only want one thing, the truth." Daniel moved closer, slowly, as if afraid that any sudden gesture might make her walk away. His voice came out hoarse, weighted with sorrow. "The truth is, I didn't leave everything because I hated my work or wanted to run from responsibility. I left because I had lost myself." He lifted his head, his eyes dark, every word cutting like a blade. "Last year, my father passed away. The man who taught me to stand tall, to be honorable, to understand that a handshake should carry more weight than 1,000 promises. And yet, in his final moment, I wasn't there. I was sitting in a sealed boardroom, wearing a flawless suit, arguing over a soulless contract. When the phone rang to tell me he was gone, it was already too late. I stood before his coffin, hearing people call my name, urging me back to the company. And I realized I had traded everything away. I had money, I had power. But I was absent from the last moment of the person who mattered most in my life. His voice broke, his hand trembling slightly as he tried to contain the pain. That night, when I looked into the mirror, I saw a stranger, a man dressed in victories that meant nothing, surrounded by people who wanted pieces of my success, but not a single part of my soul. I had built towers of glass and steel, yet I had no one who could simply look at me and see Daniel. Just Daniel. That was when I walked away, Emily, because I needed to know if someone out there could see the man, not the name. Emily stood frozen, her chest tightening. In his eyes, she saw not deception, but a wound cut deep, a loss too raw to ever be fabricated. He stretched out his hand, pointing to the magnificent view behind him. All these towers, the numbers, the praise, I could give it all up, if it means being with you and Maya. Emily was stunned. For so many days she had convinced herself that he was nothing but a liar. But in his eyes now there was no excuse, no arrogance, only a raw sincerity, almost desperate. Her voice trembled. "If I give you a chance, then it must mean no more secrets, no more lies." Daniel nodded, his eyes lighting up with unwavering conviction. "No more secrets, only us." In the vast office, with the faint noise of the city far below, the final distance between them began to close. When Emily left the glass tower that day, her emotions were still tangled. But this time, instead of only anger, she carried something else, a fragile spark of trust beginning to flicker. Daniel hadn't just confessed the truth. He had laid bare his deepest wound, the pain that had driven him to abandon everything. And that made her see. Beneath the mask of a billionaire, he was simply a man, fractured and searching. A few days later, Daniel returned to the small town. Not in a tailored suit, not in a luxury car, but as the simple man Emily and Maya once knew. Uncle Danny. He brought with him not wealth, but the determination to rebuild what had been broken. At first, Emily was cautious. She didn't open her arms immediately, but neither did she slam the door shut. Daniel began again with the little things, sweeping the stoop, carrying groceries upstairs, fixing the old cabinet that creaked each time it closed. Maya squealed with delight when she saw him again. She threw her arms around him, laughing brightly. "I knew you'd come back." Emily looked at her daughter, then at Daniel, and saw gratitude shining in his eyes. Evenings found the three of them gathered around the small kitchen table. No glittering banquets, no glasses of expensive wine, just simple stew, toasted bread, and laughter that filled the apartment. To Daniel, it was the richest feast he had ever known. At first, the townsfolk whispered, but soon they watched Daniel patiently helping neighbors, mending fences, carrying groceries for the elderly, listening for hours to the stories of a lonely veteran. From a man once doubted, he grew into someone the small community began to accept. Emily saw it all, and slowly her heart softened. She realized Daniel wasn't trying to prove he was a billionaire, nor was he using money to buy forgiveness. He simply showed up, quietly cared, and placed her and Maya at the very center of his world. One late evening, after Maya had gone to bed, Emily sat on the stoop with Daniel. The night air was cool, the street light casting a soft glow across his face. She spoke quietly. "You know, I used to think you came into my life just to prove something to yourself. But now, I think maybe I'm the one who needed to learn how to trust again." Daniel's gaze was gentle but steady. "Then let me be the one to rebuild that trust, day by day, piece by piece." And in that moment, Emily no longer saw a tech mogul with an empire. She saw only a man, flawed, scarred, but choosing to love her and Maya with every ounce of sincerity he had left. For the first time, Emily believed they could truly begin again. As time passed, the bond between Emily, Maya, and Daniel grew stronger. Simple dinners became their rhythm. Evenings on the porch turned into treasured moments. Day by day, Daniel proved he was no longer a man running from wealth, but a true part of their little home. Then one evening, beneath the soft kitchen light, Daniel knelt down, not with a lavish diamond, but a plain silver ring that glimmered faintly in his trembling hand. Maya stood behind him, clutching her teddy bear, her eyes wide and sparkling like stars. "Emily," Daniel's voice wavered, "I can't promise you castles. I can't promise you luxury. What I can promise is to wake up beside you each morning, come home to you each night, and hold Maya's hand as if she were my own daughter. Will you let me?" Tears welled in Emily's eyes. For years she had carried everything alone, never daring to dream of this moment. She nodded, her smile trembling yet radiant. "Yes, yes, Daniel." Maya squealed, jumping with joy. "Mommy's a princess now." Laughter filled the apartment, mingling with the fragile, blooming happiness. Their engagement celebration was not held in a grand hall, but in a cozy community room lovingly decorated by neighbors. Wildflowers in glass jars, strings of small lights, and a neighbor's guitar replaced chandeliers and orchestras. But to Emily, it glowed brighter than any ballroom. Daniel raised his glass, his voice thick with emotion. "I once thought my greatest achievement was this company, those towers of glass. But then I met Emily. She showed me that true wealth is not money, but kindness freely given, love fiercely kept, and family chosen with the heart. Maya, Emily, you are my family." Applause erupted, a few tears discreetly wiped away. Emily leaned close, whispering, "You're making me cry in front of everyone." Daniel smiled softly. "Then let them see what real love looks like." When the slow melody began, Daniel held out his hand, guiding Emily into a dance. They turned beneath the glow of string lights, while Maya spun in circles around them, her laughter like music itself. At one point, she slipped her small hand into theirs, linking them together. And in that fragile circle, mother, daughter, and the man who had once been lost, they finally felt whole. In that moment, Emily knew love wasn't about what someone had, but about how they chose to love when stripped of everything else. And Daniel, the man who had walked away from an empire, had chosen to stay with her, with Maya, with the family they built together.